All right, so to find this tool, it's a little bit more hidden away than a lot of them because, most of the time we use this course tools dropdown, and these are the really more common ones, right? But there are in fact more features, some of which again don't get all the love or all the attention, that can be found within a particular course by going to course admin. Under course admin, we see a lot of those same things, but if we scroll down, for instance, to communication, in addition to announcements, in addition to discussions, you can ignore chat. It's not very good. Don't get excited about chat. It's not probably what you'd hope. Intelligent agents, though, is here, and there's real value in intelligent agents. So if we go here to the tool, before we actually go, and we can template as many messages as we want. I forgot that I actually already had some here. I'm going to delete them both, though. Start again. Make sure no one's in the waiting room, too. Okay. Before we actually go and start making our messages, and we can have more than one of these templated, automatic, scheduled things doing different tasks, at different schedules. We can mix and match. But before we create any of them, there's one very important thing to do in the settings. And unfortunately, you have to do this in the settings of every individual course. This is not a setting that copies once you've done it once in a model in our previous term. This setting, though, is really important for the usefulness of intelligent agents. So we'll see in a second. So in the intelligent agent tool, right, I went to course admin, intelligent agents, click on the settings now on the top. What you need to make sure you do is set the custom value for your messages that get sent out. If you don't set a custom value, the system is going to deliver all those automatic messages just like we talked about, but it's going to be delivered from this email address, a very generic one. This is not you. And the problem with that is any of your students then who click reply to your fancy automated email is not going to get to you. Those replies aren't going to get to you. They're going to go to this generic inbox, which I actually get, but that's not nearly as useful, right? So what you'll want to do as a first step whenever you plan on using intelligent agents, and like I said, you'll have to do this in every individual course. You go to that settings gear, you click on set custom value, and you put your name, even just a first name is fine because it's just going to say delivered from blank, but full name if you want it. That's how you typically communicate with your students. And then your Conestoga College address. This is just, again, super important. There's still value in sending out messages, but if your students are replying to your thing that said, why haven't you been here for a week? And they have an explanation and they're asking you a question about how to get caught up, it's only so useful if you're just getting that first half of that message delivered and you're not getting the response and you're not opening up that conversation. So I'm just going to click save here. And again, that's just here in settings before I even make a single email. The nice thing now, though, is that however many emails I make here, this setting is going to apply to all of them. So you don't have to do it every message, but you will have to do it every course. So let's make our first agent. And again, in addition to having just one of the coolest sounding names, it's also got a lot of different use cases once you realize what all of the conditions can be. How do I go from communications intelligent to settings? So sorry, that was just a direct message that I got here. So the question was just, I think, how to get into that settings area again. What you'll do is you'll go into your course, you go to course admin. So I said communication, but that's because it's a section under the course admin page, right? So you go to a particular course, any eConestoga, any course, you go to course admin, scroll down and find intelligent agents. And then when you're in that intelligent agents tool, this is where the setting is for that return email address. So you'll apply the setting here, but then also now that we're in the tool, this is where we're going to go and create, all of the new email templates basically. All right, so let's dive in. So let's make a new one. The first thing we'll do is give it a title, and the title is just for you. It's not like the title of the email yet. So let's just call this, students not logging in. All right. We can always build an agent and then decide we're not ready to use it yet, kind of like a draft mode here, but I'll be confident and say I'm gonna set it up the way that I want. We scroll down under criteria. You can leave this to all users, but when it says all users, it means that other people that you might have enrolled, like with copy access, other instructors in your course, if there's multiple instructors, they're all going to be considered. And that's usually not what you have in mind here. So personally, I always go users with select roles, student. Just consider the students. When you're looking at who hasn't logged in, don't bother sending that message to my copy access friend. That's just going to annoy them, right? So I would always do this. Scrolling down below that, we have some of the most common use cases right up front and center here. And there is a difference between login and course activity. Typically, if you're the one building this, you only really care about your course. And that's nice that it makes that distinction. This is just, has the student logged into eConestoga, period? I mean, if they haven't logged in, they also haven't gone to your course. So it covers that as well. But this one is more targeted and it's, I think, more relevant. This is based on your course. The student might have logged in every day to eConestoga, but if they never bother to click on your course tile and go to your content or your grades, they're not going to trigger, they're not going to be considered as having accessed it. And that's what will lead them to potentially getting this message. So generally, again, I'm always thinking that this is probably the better one for you building something for your course, but both options are here. Then, like I said, you get to decide how many days since they've accessed. So the user has not accessed the course in the last blank days. Whatever makes sense for you. Is it a week? Is it 2 days? Depends on how often you expect people to log in. The flip side of this is true. The user has accessed the course. You could sort of reward people saying, send a message saying thanks for logging in, but I don't think it's nearly as common or probably not as useful. We'll talk about release conditions in the next example. For the one that we're building right now, this is the condition. We already have a condition, user hasn't logged in 7 days. So it's kind of a special case, but it's also maybe the most common one. Release conditions is where we're going to find all of the other possibilities for what might cause a message to be sent. And the spoiler is that it can be based on just about any tool. Did they view content? Did they post to a discussion? Did they get a certain grade value on an item? Did they get a certain quiz score? All of these things can be triggers for emails, and you template the email based on what you know the criteria is. So we'll do one other example after this one. But now that we've got our title, right? We just have our title here. I'm going to try not to scroll too quick because I have a bad habit of just jumping around and making the screen really blurry probably. We've got our title. We have our audience, the criteria, and the reason, the logic, the criteria. Then we finally do the email composition and the scheduling. So first of all, when we're thinking about an email, we have a decision. Do we want this to be sent only the first time somebody qualifies for it or every time somebody qualifies for it? And if you schedule this to run every week, in this case, do you want to send a message on week 5 if they haven't logged in 7 days? And then again on week 9, if once again, a new 7 days have passed and they haven't logged in again? If the answer is yes, then say take action every time. Otherwise, you might only want to tell the student once. And in a lot of the other use cases, that's going to be the case. 1 day before the assignment, if you want to remind people who haven't uploaded to the assignment automatically, you can do that. It's not going to make sense to do that, the next day, right after the due date or whatever. So we usually want to send an email. Because I've changed that setting, right? I have that confirmed here. It's going to be delivered from a person named Nathan, and all responses will go to my address. So watch out for this. And if you notice that it's not right, go back to that main setting. A question in chat: if you share a course shell with another staff member, example, course versus lab, can you set this up just for your own lab section? Yeah, you can set up a release condition in addition to what you've done. So let's say you wanted to do the last access thing, right? You could then create a condition in addition to that says, based on class list, are they in a particular section? So if you had 2 sections here, then you could choose your section, and that logic gets added to the other logic, which was haven't logged in 7 days. So now both of those things need to be satisfied so that only a certain number of students will get that message. And then what is the message? And this is where there's some tricks to this, and it's very, very specific. It is very specific, but there are these useful pop-up reminders that'll always be here. So a couple of things. The first thing is that there are special email addresses to use. Remember, this is a intelligent tool that's only going to send emails to those people that qualify. So you're not just going to hard code in an email here, and you're not going to put your entire class's emails here. There's basically a variable that needs to be used, and we can find that variable under this pop-up, which says, what special email addresses can I use? It pops up here, and it tells us initiating user. This is the one that matters. And it's very specific. It's very similar to the replace string that I taught you about with the announcement tool, but not the same. Kind of frustratingly not the same, because you can't just remember one now and use it wherever. These ones only work here. The ones that I showed you, like first name, only work in the announcement. So keep them separate. But here we can use this thing. I'm just going to copy and paste it, right? As long as you're very careful, because you need to have these curly brackets as well. So initiating user, that's who this message is going to go to. It's going to be sent, and it's going to send individual messages to everybody that qualifies. So the good news is, it's not just going to put 10 emails here, and suddenly all 10 students who haven't logged in the last week can see the other 9, right? That's not something to worry about. Each one is going to be sent individually and just addressed to them, not only with their email address, but when we get down to the message, we can put their name in it, right? So this is the very particular email address we use. If you want to CC yourself, like you can hard code that, right? Just I always want to get a copy of each message, just as another way of seeing where it got sent without having to log into eConestoga. Feel free, but you don't have to. You can always log into eConestoga later and see the report basically of who got the message. I'll leave myself here, why not? And then subject. Now we have this, again, idea, this concept of replace strings, but of a different set that is used only in this tool, but we can pop this open and see them. And this is interesting because you actually might have this exact same replace string, this exact same intelligent agent, once you've built it, used in multiple different courses that you teach. And if those courses have different codes and different titles, that's actually fine. Because your message, your subject and your message can be built with variables that actually pull your course's name as well. So here's what I mean, right? Hello, well, I'm gonna leave the personalized stuff for the message down here. Haven't seen you in, and this is where if you were typing this message, you might just confirm for your student, math 1, 2, 3, 4, section 1, whatever, right? You can use a replace string for that. The org name is the name of the entire organization. We don't want that. We want org unit name. Org, and the terminology here, not super intuitive. It just comes from experience and it comes from, training, and hopefully that's what I'm here for. Org unit is like a fancy way of saying course shell. And so that's what that means. Org is just the entire eConestoga. So it would just say eConestoga. But org unit name is going to say math 1, 2, 3, 4, applications of math or whatever, right? It has the same curly brackets, and I'm always going to copy and paste, because if I get even one character wrong or an extra space or something here, then it's not going to work. So I basically do that, right? I say, okay, haven't seen you in blank. Then in my message, I can use other replace strings like initiating user first name. It's not just first name, different than the announcements, but initiating user first name is the same person who's getting this particular email, and it's their name based on their eConestoga account. So you might now say, hello, whatever first name. I noticed that you haven't logged into org unit name in the last 7 days. Is everything all right? Let me know if I can help. And you can sign it here. I mean, you can copy and paste your Outlook signature or something, right? So we've templated our email. You can add attachments to this email, just like you might from sending a message in course mail in the class list tool. Then finally, we think about scheduling, because some of these things are recurring, and some of them really we'll think of as a one-off thing. But in any case, you have to kind of give it a range. So we say, or I mean, you don't have to. The other thing you can do is you can run it manually. You could save it right now and pick a day, log into the eConestoga, log into the tool, and click the run button. And just have that be when it happens. But for something like this, I think we want to schedule it. So it's truly hands off once we've set this thing up to go, right? So we'll say use schedule. I'm going to say update schedule. And what we basically do is we decide, okay, how often do you want this thing to run? The most frequent is daily, which would be, once a day, right? But we could do things like weekly as well. I'm going to say repeat every week on a Friday, and then you give it a range. So I'm going to say, whatever, starting earlier this week and maybe running until the end of the term or something, right? So I can always go back, I can always edit this again, update the schedule, but we can kind of see what's happening every week on a Friday, starting this week until this. So based on these settings, it's telling you, okay, well, if I'm going to be running every Friday, I mean, even though today is Thursday, but the next Friday that I found is going to be Friday, April the 16th. You'll notice that you don't actually pick a very specific time here. There's no option to pick a time. It just kind of happens that it always runs at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's every day, no matter what you pick for scheduling, it's just going to run at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's when you'll see it. That's when your students will get it. So if I click save and close right now, right, I'll see that I've now created my agent. It was active because I left that checked at the very top. It's telling me when it's going to run next. And once it's run, I will see that information here as well. It'll be a link that I can click on, and it'll show me how many students qualified and how many students got that. So that's the most common use case, I would say, because nothing else does as good a job of automatically tracking, having the student not logged in. But in one other example we'll do here, let's click on new. And let's say, assignment 1 not submitted. You might think from the student perspective, if it's one day before an assignment is due, maybe it'd be nice to be reminded, something like that. So we can do that. And we can make sure that this message is only sent to students who haven't submitted the assignment yet. So if I go here, we'll give it a title. The title is just for me. Once again, I'm going to make this only for students. I'm actually going to skip this stuff because this isn't what I'm doing this time, right? This is a different thing built based on a tool, based on interaction from the student. This is, again, where these release conditions become super powerful and they can really kind of trigger on almost anything. So we say create and attach. I'm going to pick the tool, but just again, I'll scroll through this once more slowly and show you this can be based on the assignments tool. Did a student submit? Has a student not submitted? It can be based on the awards tool, on the checklist tool, right? I could have, for instance, for the eDev 0660 course, made a thing here that said, if you haven't completed a particular checklist by the 16th, send an email to all of the students saying, hey, just checking in, you haven't finished your checklist, right? Class list is where you would split things based on group. You could have very specific groups get certain messages, or one half of a merged course in terms of section, when a student was logged in, that sort of thing. Competencies we can skip. Content is another big one, right? It can be based on, have they viewed a certain page that you posted, or have they not visited that page? Have they not completed a certain thing, right? The discussion tool, did they post? Did they get a score on a particular grade? Have they attempted the quiz? Not only have they attempted it, but potentially what score do you want them to have? And there's an actual greater than, less than. You could send one message that said, hey, you didn't do so well on this quiz, check in on this day for an extra option, and you could only send that to people who got less than 60%. But you completely automate that message, right, once you know what your conditions are. So we'll base this on the assignment tool, and in particular, no submission to the folder. Because I'm building this very specifically, right, I'm not building an intelligent agent that just checks any assignment. It's always going to be very specific. So now that I've told it the type of condition, I'm going to have to tell it the specific assignment folder that I want it to check. We'll say this one's assignment 1, right? And you can see here that there's the logic. You can apply multiple conditions. I mean, you could have a thing that was mixing and matching 3 items. Did they view the content in your first module and complete a checklist and attempt a quiz. You keep adding more conditions, and then it becomes more and more narrow for who qualifies, right? But nothing is going to stop you from doing that. Or you could do an or. You could set up 2 conditions here, or 3 or 5 or whatever. And if you say any condition, as long as the student met any one of them, then they'll get a message. So there are what feels like infinite combinations of things you can do across all those tools. But usually, I mean, if I'm thinking about using this practically, I'm focusing it on one particular thing. Did a student do a thing, or did they not do a thing? It should be, fairly straightforward from there. Has not submit to assignment 1. This time, just the first time they qualify. I mean, I'm really going to only have this run on a single day anyways, right? Same thing though, we're going to template an email. I'm going to use my initiating user. I wasn't just saying this. I literally never type this myself. I will always copy and paste it from the pop-up there, because why not? Then I'm not going to type that wrong. Do I want to use any of these? You can't unfortunately do things like pull the assignment name. That's not an option here, right? No matter what condition you choose. I still probably use at least the org unit code. Assignment 1 in blank is due soon. I know the concept for this email. The concept is send it on the day before the assignment to the students who haven't uploaded yet, right? So I'm going to write it towards that goal. Hello, initiating user first name. You can do other things like, there's a whole bunch there that you're never going to use. You're never going to use initiating user student name. Like, it's so impersonal for no added benefit, but it's there. Just a friendly reminder, and I'll get to that question in a second as well. Just a friendly reminder that assignment 1 is due tomorrow. I mean, I wouldn't yell at my students like this, but you get the idea. We're going to schedule this, right? You still pick, daily and all that stuff, but it's really, only going to be on the day that you pick here in this case. So we'll say 15th to the 16th or something. Or you do something like you say weekly, but the range isn't more than a week. And again, you pick the day here. So really, it's only going to run on Friday, April the 16th. Is there an easy way that you could see how many students this applies to before you set up the agent? Not before you set up the agent, no, unfortunately. One thing that you actually can do though, like if you want to build an agent but never actually use it for the email, or not necessarily use it for the email, there's nothing you can do until you've set it up. You're going to have to build it and build the logic. But then you can basically actually do this thing where it says practice run, which would sort of like identify for you who would get it without actually sending the email. But to directly answer your question, you still will have to build it first, but then you can just sort of always only practice run, see who's there, potentially reach out to people as needed. This is also where you would run something manually if you wanted to do that, right? So if you don't actually build in the scheduling and you just have it in your mind or put it in your Outlook calendar to log in and do it, the nice thing about that is that it's not going to be limited to the 4 o'clock time in particular on that given day. And sometimes you might need that. You might need it run in the morning on a day, and that's the most useful for you. Can't schedule it that way, so you might as well just leave the schedule off, remind yourself, and just run it. And if you actually do the real run here, it will send those emails in addition to showing you who qualified.